Dun, 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 dun. Hey, this Hang On Air is live. Football guys, week 5, Thursday night. And we've got Thursday night football, as always, Matt Waldman. What do we think about what we have witnessed in the first half down in Tampa?
Well, the first thing is that we can say for sure that the New England defense is still looking kind of toothless, and they're still having some issues, not necessarily on the back end as much as they are on the front end. Doug Martin and company have ripped some holes through that defensive front, and Martin looks great, very quick. The acceleration is definitely there. He's getting 7 to 8 yards per touch. Had a touchdown with a nice little dive over the top at the end of a drive, and it made you kind of wish that they just keep handing it off to him after he didn't play the first couple of series. He didn't play the first series, but it looks like he's going to be in there pretty much to stay with a little bit of spelling here and there from Sims and Rodgers. So that's good news for folks who picked him in the mid rounds and said, let's hold on to him and, let's get him and ride him. Brady looks great when he has time. And that's the big thing there, because what you're seeing is that despite the fact that they're playing a cover 4, as Tony Romo mentioned, and they're playing way off the ball with the safeties and daring them to just keep it long drives over the middle, Gerald McCoy, is the Pro Bowl player he is able to generate pressure almost on his own. They're getting some good outside pressure from Ayers, though, and a couple of other players that is forcing Brady to step up, and then McCoy's spinning off and making plays. You've gotten some decent play from Brady after an interception where it looked like a flash of pressure forced him to throw it high. But, Brandon Cooks has been involved, but mostly it's been the Hogan and Amendola show with some nice little cameo appearances from White. Even Deion Lewis got in the act and has looked pretty fresh and spry there. Rex Burkhead's still, sitting on the inactive list. So Lewis is still a guy you want to keep an eye out for in case something happens to White, because honestly, Lewis is the vastly superior runner.
He's better. Yeah,
he is. He's way better. I don't understand.
It's just so funny. You watch these touches for James White, and Lewis can take all these touches and do more with them. But
James White has been reliable. They love him, but I think about it in the same way that some people love mayonnaise and some people actually love spicy mustard, and I just think that James White is a mayonnaise running back. That's solid, but man, every time people say that, I just want to cringe because I think about what Deion Lewis can do. And it's just like, there's no comparison when both these guys are healthy, and he looks healthy. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I rarely do I say I'm looking forward to free agency that maybe he won't be on the Patriots next year. On the Patriots this year, Gene, and as Matt said, it's the Amendola and Hogan show, not the Gronk show. Will the Gronk show be back on the air in week 6?
Yes. Yeah, well, I don't think we know exactly when this happened. It seems like it was probably something that may have happened during practice Tuesday. The Patriots beat writers didn't really know what to make of his late addition to the injury report on Tuesday, and then it was mostly a travel day yesterday. They didn't do much in practice, and he's been seen with a compression sleeve on. Adam Schefter is already saying that both him and Rex Burkhead, who's been practicing for most of a week and a half, are expected back next week, and there's 10 days to recover unless there's some unexpected complication of the injury is not being reported accurately. And given that he's got the Gronkowski has the compression sleeve on, that's not likely to be the case. He should be able to come back. I think he'll probably be practicing next week and play.
Do you think, Bloom, that Deion Lewis has still got a shot at getting traded, and that this might be a good opportunity for teams to go, oh, yeah, maybe he still is worthwhile?
Well, maybe, but I also think that the Patriots are rational. I think Bill Belichick knows what he has. Remember, he basically single-handedly won that playoff game in Houston last year, and I think they're smart about it. And, somebody said something to me when I was opining about the possibility of trading Lewis, wanting to see him get traded, that maybe Belichick is just saving him. And that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. And he has been a guy that, when they did ride him hard 2 years ago, he went down. But I don't know. But I'm handing the baton to you for our Dr. Gene injury marathon now.
Well, let's see. How about a latest update on Devontae Adams?
I was surprised that he was already practicing in a limited fashion. And again, we've talked about this before, and I don't think we've talked about it in a while. Loss of consciousness does not necessarily put players in a different category. Things like amnesia and other symptoms will sometimes be more concerning, and there's been studies that shown that loss of consciousness isn't necessarily something that's going to lead to a prolonged recovery. But it was dramatic how he was taken off the field last week. And the other reason I wasn't expecting to see this is the Packers medical staff is known to be conservative, and I think it's still anecdotal, as I've said the last couple of weeks, but I think the NFL teams have been less likely to clear players in 5 days and send them to the independent neurologist to play in 1 week than not. We've seen more players this year take more than 1 week to recover. And although Adams has 10 days to get ready for this week's game against Dallas, you would have expected that he would have been likely to fall into that category as well for multiple different reasons. However, he's been in helmet and shoulder pads the last couple of weeks, and one of the last stages, if not the last stage before clearance from a physical exercise perspective, before clearance for contact, is sport-specific activity in pads. And that was the case in practice Wednesday. That's the case in practice on Thursday today. And I don't think there's any guarantee that he or Ty Montgomery is going to play this week. But they are preparing for that possibility. They are doing what they need to do to get him in a situation where they can send him to the independent neurologist Friday, Saturday, and have him play. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but it's obviously a lot more positive than him having not practiced on Wednesday and Thursday. So this is going to come down to the wire a little bit yet, I think. We may know for certain tomorrow, but it's possible that it might be a little bit open-ended all the way into Sunday.
I don't really mean to do this to you, but a lot of people did this to me in radio spots this week. So I'm just going to throw Green Bay running backs at you. Here, catch them. See who you catch, who you drop. What do you do this week with Green Bay running backs?
So Jamal Williams has practiced fully both days. And I was a little bit nervous about the MRI reporting that suggested this was a muscle issue rather than a structural and ligament issue, because the way his knee twisted and that they were calling it a knee, if you're going to call it a muscle injury, you would think that it's a hamstring tendon strain toward the outside of the joint, because it looked like that was kind of it was kind of a lateral mechanism there. And those things can be difficult to recover from, but he was fully practicing on Wednesday and again on Thursday. So there must have been really nothing on the MRI. And just I don't know if you guys have done this before, but where you don't necessarily strain a muscle, but you stretch it just enough that you get that burning sensation and it feels terrible. And then it goes away after a few minutes. And that may have been what happened with Williams, and nothing showed up on the MRI. And if that's the case, there's no reason to restrict him from practice, and he's good to go. Another full practice tomorrow and some positive media interviews will go a long way to thinking that that's the case. But I think that's probably where we are. Ty Montgomery, I'm still not buying that he's playing this week. They've listed it as ribs. There have been multiple reports that it was multiple fractured ribs. He's out there in a protective vest. Mike McCarthy says they still want to evaluate him, even though he's looking good. But it's next to impossible to expect him to not get through a game without taking a hit on that area or getting taken to the ground in that area where he's going to have to deal with pain. Yes, you can shoot it up, but it's just not. It's a tough situation. So I think they're giving him a chance. Get out there and see how the vest feels over the past couple of days, and then we'll see how Friday through Sunday goes. And he may be active, but Jamal Williams is fully practicing. Aaron Jones is healthy. If Devontae Adams is there this weekend, their full complement of wide receivers is going to be healthy. They may have both of their tackles back healthy. What sense does it make to put Ty Montgomery out there and potentially take an aggravation that could leave you a few short days away from having pretty much your entire team intact? So I think he's going to. He was not seen at the media portion of practice on Thursday. Mike McCarthy said they were still evaluating. Yes, there's a ton more optimism than you think that there would have been for a running back that has multiple rib fractures, but I'll believe he's playing when I see him. I still think we ought to consider him a game time decision at best.
Yeah, I think the answer there is he's a little afraid of losing his job, even though he's played better than those guys.
Yeah.
I think anyone who's watched it would say he shouldn't be afraid of losing his job. But I would also say that when you're a first year starter and then they draft two guys behind you who are pretty well known to be good, that may light a little fire under you, same way like Alex Smith had to admit that was happening with him, even though, of course, it might be a little different situation, but still.
Yeah, maybe. They didn't, Montgomery didn't seem to be in any concern for losing his job leading up the last couple of weeks. He was getting a huge percentage of the team target, so that may be in the back of his head, but I don't know. Multiple broken ribs running back. have to play in a protective vest. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he's probably sleeping in a chair right now anyway, if he can sleep. I know Leroy Horde had to do that one time with multiple broken ribs. But
you don't want to roll over on him, that's for sure.
No, not at all. How about Melvin Gordon? What's going on with that? Because, I mean, he's banged up. It's the same knee, had the microfracture surgery on. What are the concerns there long term?
Probably not many. I don't think they'd let him do much if the bone bruise that he was dealing with was anywhere near the area where he had microfracture surgery involving cartilage, because that would be a weight-bearing bone situation. Would be a lot closer to what's going on with Sam Bradford. Even though he didn't get many carries last week, he got the vast majority of carries. I think he got 10 of 13, and one of them was an end around or a reverse that didn't involve him. And then it was like 10-2 Gordon versus Oliver, and Oliver's beaten up a little bit this week too. He's been on the injury report with a soft tissue something or other. What's he got here? A hamstring issue where he's not practiced for a couple of days. So you wonder if he's going to be able to go. Gordon has fully practiced 2 days in a row, and it certainly looks like, again, over the last month or so, the weeks where Gordon has fully practiced, his workload has been pretty much normal. And with Oliver probably not ready to go, I don't have too much concern for Gordon. It's something we're going to have to watch, and it's going to be painful, but I don't think that he's on the verge of needing extended time off to cool off something that may be related to, where the concern would be that it would be related to that. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Gene, and I'm cheating a little bit because I think I know the answer to this, but I like having fun with this. Derek Carr has a fracture in his back, and he might play next week. So it's just crazy, right?
No. It's happened before. Cam Newton and Tony Romo have had similar injuries. So the deal with this is, it sounds scary, right? It's a fracture. You're talking about a fracture in your spine, but it's a fracture to the structure of the spine. It's not a fracture to the spinal column itself. If this was a fracture to the area that enclosed the spinal cord, it'd be a whole different concern here. How soon could he come back? Could he come back at all? Was there any spinal cord damage? This is an injury to the bony protrusions to the back of the spine. That's the skeleton in which the spinal muscles are inserting on the spinal bones to help move the spine. So it's painful. It hurts. It's a broken bone, and there's a ton of muscle spasm that go along with that because of where the broken bone is injured. But once you get to the point where you can manage the pain control and the spasms are under control, you don't necessarily have to wait, because it's not a structural weight-bearing situation. You don't have to wait those 6+ weeks for the bone itself to heal, to be cleared. You can put a pad over it. It's not the same as a rib fracture where every movement is painful. And we've seen players play through rib fracture. So it's similar in that regard, where it's a pain tolerance issue. And he's already throwing this week. So if he can get to the point where he can comfortably throw and protect himself in the pocket, then there's really no surrounding tissues that you're going to be concerned about. The worst thing that happens is you take another hit. Well, it's not the worst thing happens. The most likely aggravation is to take another hit in that area and to have some back spasms. And once that bone has started to heal and the back spasms calm down, usually you can get away with, you have to be hit in that very same area for that to be a problem. And we've seen the mechanism of this injury where Tony Romo was a knee to the back, Derek Carr was a knee to the back, Cam Newton was a car accident. Or a pickup truck accident, as the case was. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Derek Carr plays next week. But I think he's probably better than questionable, is what I would say. So I think there's a good chance he comes back next week. Is that what you were expecting? Were you setting me up?
It is. Well, because it's what you talked about. I remember back to Dante Culpepper. It was Dante Culpepper had an injury to the transverse process, and like you said, if we all remember the skeleton on the rod from the classroom, and those little bony protrusions, those little knobs, and they you take a big hard hit, they can get cracked, but that is not the same thing when we think of back fracture. And I will say this, and then I'll pass it over to Matt. And EJ Manuel actually looked okay last week. It was crazy.
I was waiting for Gene to comment, but I guess
How
not.
dare
so.
you?
I just triggered some Buffalo Bills fans.
I know, really? I know. So I will say this, just because every time I hear David Carr, I think of Bernard Berrien or my buddy Mike McGregor at FF Today as our private joke. Bernard Berrien.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time I said David Carr instead of Derek Carr and Gary Payton instead of Sean Payton.
I said I did the same thing with Javid Best and Travis Best. So
Yeah.
I think I wrote that in the RSP a number of times.
Georgia Tech boy.
Travis Best Javid Best came out. See, there you go.
You are the Georgia boy.
There you go. Look long term at Chris Carson's injury and how that may impact his his dynasty prospects in terms of if you knew that the team was still high on him, or high enough on him that after this injury is going to be fine, would you keep him as a definite hold on your dynasty roster?
I don't think the injury is going to be a long-term issue for him. I think the way I would answer that question would be I'm not aware of what the contract situation for Eddie Lacy and Thomas Rawls is, but Carson had earned his way to be the first man on early downs and looked good doing so. And even though Pete Carroll has still been very complimentary of Thomas Rawls, you wonder how much chance Carson would have gotten if Rawls was healthy all the way through preseason. And the answer is maybe still plenty. And that may have not been an issue even if they were all healthy at that point. But if the contract situation for both those players is any kind of concern at all, then I don't think you worry about Carson. He's not coming back this year unless by some chance there's a ton of injuries. Seattle's in the playoffs and he's close enough and it's deep into January and he's relatively healthy, but that's 3 months away. And I think you're looking at a minimum 3 to 4 month recovery. This is another situation where they sutured a ligament back together and it's got to take time to heal. The bone fracture is probably not going to be a problem at all. We've seen issues with Vincent Brown and I'm blanking who else just popped into my head there a second ago with this similar injury that took a little bit longer than you would have expected it to, and it's not coming back as I stall. But if it does,
Thomas Rawls?
No. Thomas Rawls' situation is very similar to Chris Carson, but it was always a little bit unusual. It wasn't unusual that he took a little bit longer to come back because I think they were being cautious with him. There's somebody else that I'm thinking of with a higher fibular fracture that took a little bit longer time to come back, and I got distracted by Vincent Brown in my head. But he's got plenty of time to recover from this. I think you could conceivably see him healthy and moving in OTAs. It's somewhere between the Thomas Rawls and Marcus Mariota situation where there's a significant high ankle sprain that required surgical intervention. And then the bones may or may not be plated, and the location of that's a little bit different. So I don't think I'm worried about from that perspective. I think from a dynasty, and even then, I don't think Eddie Lacy is any threat at all. I think I'd be more mindful of what Pete Carroll and the Seahawks think about Thomas Rawls over the longer term, and Carson already has a head start. So if there's no concern with his recovery, you think that over the long term he'd be a meaningful and productive part of that backfield moving forward.
Gene, a good question from the chat room. Alex Reif. Sorry if I mispronounce your last name. What's the outlook for Woodhead, or is it still too early? What did we learn about Danny Woodhead's hamstring to where we should have him on our radar? Not that Baltimore's offense is giving us much hope, but maybe his absence is the main reason why.
So he's on injured reserve. He can begin practicing 6 weeks after they put him on injured reserve. And I think when I looked earlier this week, I don't have it right in front of me. I think week 10 was the first week he was eligible to come back, which means he can start practicing around week 8. And I think that's the time where we have to watch. If he is practicing and already starting to recondition and is going to have 2 weeks to condition before he is eligible to return, then I don't think there's going to be much issue. But this is different than the David Johnson situation where there's going to be no concern with David Johnson having cardiovascular issues or being close to football condition when he comes back, because he's going to have 2 weeks. That Johnson's issue is, can he be cleared for contact? Woodhead's issue is, what do we need to do to make sure he doesn't aggravate this injury a second time? Because as we've seen and we say commonly, when you have a multi-week hamstring injury that gets aggravated, this is where you are. So there wasn't anything that said his MRI showed a torn tendon or that the muscle was torn completely through and something that required surgery, but they knew it was going to be close to a 6-week situation before he was cleared to come back. So give him the benefit of the doubt, and the hope is that he starts to recondition at that point. If that's the case, if there's any inkling that that's going to be the case, then I think you go ahead and add him and carry him for 2 or 3 weeks into the future if he's on your waiver wire now. If not, then you're sort of watching week to week to week, because it's going to take him 2 weeks from the time he starts practicing to the time he plays. And hopefully that's in advance of him being eligible to play. But I don't think we know just yet where we are with that.
And from the latest I've seen, it was week 11.
Was it? Yeah, I don't know. Let me.
Yeah. I'll know because I dropped him today in the league. So it was that was definitely something I studied.
I'm assuming that my math skills were good here, but Danny Woodhead eligible week 10. So they put him on IR after week 1, so he should be eligible to return in 8 weeks. So what may have happened? Does Baltimore have a bye week in week 10?
I think they do.
So that may be what's going on there. Let me look at Chase's real quick, so we're not giving out any information that we shouldn't here. Where is my?
Well, we got Deion Lewis making some nice moves.
So Baltimore has a bye in week 10, so he's eligible to return to play in week 10, but they are not playing in week 10. So week 11 is the first week he'll be back. So that still stands. He should be able. He's going to practice. The first day he can practice is after week 8. So you're looking after the Miami game in week 8 to see where they are in the practice participation, and you're listening in week 7 for any information that you may get over the next couple of weeks about where his progress is in rehab. Will he be able to return to practice at the first eligible opportunity? Because then for sure, if he's allowed to practice after week 8, then he has 3 weeks to prepare, and there really shouldn't be much concern about what his role will be when he comes back.
If you own Michael Crabtree, how do you feel about
pretty good? I don't think I looked today when most of the video from Oakland's practice was showing David Carr throwing, and those videos had helmet and shoulder pads, but not much else. And I don't know if this was a padded practice for Oakland or not. If it was, and Crabtree was listed as a full participant, then you feel wonderful, because that means there's been an imaging study already that says the lung contusion is healed well enough for them to clear him, for him to be put into a position where he could have taken contact to that area. And if that's the case, then he's essentially been cleared to play. I don't know. I'm 90% certain that's the case for him to be listed full, because he was listed limited last Thursday and didn't practice on Friday. But I'm not sure. So I think it's a really good sign. I think it's an indication that they're preparing him to play. But tomorrow is important. If he's listed full tomorrow, and there's any indication in the media interviews in the locker room that's good to go, I think he's fine. And if that's the case, it's going to be full workload and full usage. It's not a hamstring or a groin where you have to worry about, the Doug Baldwin situation from last week, or will Gronk be limited tonight if he was able to play through a thigh contusion. This is a deal where if he's cleared, there really shouldn't be any limitations at all. So we should know in advance of Sunday where he stands.
Gene, what do we think about Marcus Mariota participating a bit in practice? If he plays, do we play him? And if he plays, do we play our Titans?
I don't think he's going to play. The Titans have said that even if he doesn't fully practice, that he could play. But Mike Mularkey essentially said that he was asked, did he do anything more? Did he look any better? And he said no. He did a little bit more, but they didn't ask him to do much more. And it's Wednesday, Thursday. And if it is Thursday and he's not been able to do much, even if they're willing to scale back his running a little bit, he's got to be able to protect himself in the pocket, and he's got to be able to use that. I'm not actually sure what leg it is, but either way, both of those legs are important for what he needs to do in the pocket and throw the ball downfield. And they've talked all week about wanting to be smart with him. I think they're setting things up for, unless he has a semi-miraculous improvement into Friday, I don't foresee him playing. I think they're getting Matt Castle ready to go for that reason, and they don't want an aggravation that could cost them more weeks into the future. So prepare for Mariota not to play, and if he does play, then you're not going to get any rushing yards out of him at all. If he does have to move in the pocket, there's a risk of an aggravation, and we've already seen in the one pass he threw after the injury that he struggled to get it downfield accurately. So I don't see it happening. I would probably avoid him. There has to be something very, very positive in practice tomorrow for me to be comfortable to say, okay, then, if he does well through the weekend, I think we're okay. But if he's not doing anything in practice, what's the likelihood that he's going to be able to do much in the game on Sunday? I think it's pretty low.
Well, I just got to say, as a game update, it's fun to watch Gerald McCoy owning the Patriots offensive line and Tom Brady with all the batted down passes and spin-offs to force Brady in one direction, spin off and sack him in another. It's really actually quite fun to watch. Another thing that hasn't been quite fun to watch is my cockamamie theory that maybe the shoulder injury to Cam Newton temporarily cut off the blood supply to his frontal lobe today. But it looks like it's worn off a little bit, at least according to his halftime interview on CBS, and realizes that he's a father of 2 young girls, that maybe one day they might be interviewing a football player and ask them a critical question that actually requires some thought and technical skill that she absolutely has. And maybe they won't laugh her off like they did, like he laughed off Jordan Rodriguez. So let's ask about Jordan Howard. Our weekly update on the shoulder is, after you've seen him play at all, are you any more optimistic, or are you thinking, how's he going to last?
I don't think he's healed yet, so I think another direct blow to that area, either being hit or more concerningly driven into the ground, could cause some issues for him. I think he made up his mind a couple of weeks ago that he was going to play through the injury, pain notwithstanding. He is not on the Monday night injury report today, so unless he's added later, they're not restricting him in practice. They're not sending him in for treatment. So that suggests that he's gotten through the past couple of games without any significant aggravations, even though there have been some times where you've seen him really not want to move that arm much and maybe wince a little bit after some hits. He's gotten comfortable enough with it where he knows it's something that he's going to have to work through. And the hope is that he doesn't take another hit to that area or take into the ground in that area where he gets a setback to where we're back where we were leading into week 2.
Dean, of course, we're going to have you here Sunday morning to check in on Sunday morning things before we let you go into that good night. Anything else you're watching closely for practice reports tomorrow? I made a point to not ask you about Andrew Luck. We'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, I think we'll know. We're going to know next week whether or not week 7 is possible or not. He's not doing much. They held him out of practice today, even though you didn't ask me about him. I'm going to talk about him anyway. But I think we're getting there with him. And I don't know that they feel as motivated as relatively well as Jacoby Brissett is playing. I think the interesting revelation we got from Luck today was that it was a posterior injury and it wasn't the superior labral thing that we were kind of expecting. And I don't know that makes us feel any better about him today. But it helps to understand why they took the extra time that they did to continue to build up strength. As I scroll through, I don't think so. Carlos Hyde, I think we have to keep at least a little bit of an eye on. I'm not too worried about him.
Wendell Smallwood, you have any insight on Wendell Smallwood?
Exactly where I was going. I'm starting to believe that Wendell Smallwood is not going to play this week. He's not practiced for 2 days with a knee injury. I think it was Reuben Frank that reported that what they were concerned about was some swelling in the knee and soreness. And if that's all that it is, maybe they're being cautious for the first couple of days and we see a full practice tomorrow and it's not concerned. But I think that things are shaping up for him not to be able to practice. I was happy to see Jerick McKinnon fully practice today. It looks like he's going to go. Been happy to see that Odell Beckham has had a couple of limited practices in a row because I was more concerned about the tweak that he had at the ankle than the finger issue. Doug Baldwin fully practiced today. Kelvin Benjamin was back to some practice, as was Sammy Watkins. So I don't think there's too much else going on. Along the tight end position, it looks like most of those guys that we had concerns about are probably going to go. We know that Tyler Eifert is out, but I think Ben Watson and Jack Doyle and Tyler Kroft are all going to be able to go. Sean Lee probably not going to be able to go. There's a few other defensive players that I'm watching a little bit carefully, but Jatavis Brown, chief among them, where I'm not really sure what's happening with him yet. He's not practiced with an ankle injury for a couple of days, and there's really not much out of the LA media to suggest what's going on with him either. So I think we've hit the highlights of those guys. I don't know anybody else on your mind. I think Smallwood was a good one to bring up.
A couple of quick ones from the chat room really quick. Jordan Reed close back to full health after the bye?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of times where he flinched a little bit, and that first catch was a little bit iffy, but he was able to get through the game. He's got a ton of time to recover. I think, yes, on the other side of the bye, there shouldn't be any concern with him or Kelly. I thought Kelly looked pretty good. We have to wait and see what the ankle turns out to be, but both those guys should be healthier coming out of the bye than they were for sure going into week 5.
Well, all right.
Bloom.
Well,
where did he go?
It was nice to have Bloom. I guess you and I can, if you need to go, you can. But it's kind of interesting.
I'm not going to leave you hanging.
Well, I appreciate that. But
we'll see if he gets back in here as we go. I don't know. He said he was looking at. Let's see, pretty light. Well, yeah, I don't know. Plank Melody says pretty light report, all things considering. I guess that's probably true, but none of these weeks feel light to me anymore.
No, it really has been it has been pretty bad. But are you watching the game tonight at all?
I haven't in the last half an hour while we've been talking back and forth, but I think the discussion about what's going on with the Patriots defense is interesting because it seems like there's two issues going on. One, they're having difficulty stopping the run, but the secondary is also had some problems. And with Malcolm Brown and Devin McCourty and signing Stephon Gilmore, you just wonder, what might be going on with the secondary. And it doesn't appear to be pass rush related because Trey Flowers and Deatrick Wise have been putting some pressure there. It's not been consistent, but maybe the loss of Donta Hightower has had a little bit more issues than not. But I don't know. It looks like that after that first quarter where it was a little bit of an issue there and Doug Martin looked as good as they did. I mean, we're getting into a quarter and a half here where they've done quite a bit better. I'm not really sure what's going on with this particular drive, but other than the goofy pass or roughing the passer penalties, it looks like things have been better.
One of the questions I have, besides the fact that, from a Tampa perspective, they should be just pounding the ball with Doug Martin because they are just killing those people inside behind Justin Britt, and they just need to keep running. They got a quarter and a half in a close game. Just make them stop Doug Martin. Make them do it before you start throwing bombs downfield. It's just, to me, it's like disrupting the flow of an offense. It's actually has potential to work well. But then the second thing is they talked about communication being an issue with Stephon Gilmore. So my question to you is, we looked on the offensive side of the ball with the Patriots and how that when they bring free agents in, those free agents end up having issues being able to work out well. It's kind of hit or miss with them because of the communication. It makes me wonder, are the Patriots at this point, because they have so many embedded coaches and it's kind of an embedded system that's entrenched in what they do, that the communication has become a little bit more advanced. And so if you're a new guy and you're not ultra intelligent at picking things up fast, you could be a real liability to this team. I would think that there's extra layers, just like any type of work team that's worked together for like 10 years plus.
I don't know. What do you think about that? I think we've had discussion about how the Patriots have simplified the offensive coding. So they just walk up to the line and say a state. They call Alabama and they know what's going on. I think the interesting thing about the Patriots defensive game planning has always been that they look to take away what you do best and put you in a very uncomfortable situation. And I think it's a game planning issue. They haven't been as multiple. I can remember writing articles up about them 10 years ago or so where, they had one of the more multiple front playbooks in the league. I don't know that that's the case anymore necessarily. I don't know. There may be something to that, but it's.
Yeah, from an offensive side, I think you're right about that. The only thing that I'd say is that the blitz reads and the hot reads that they have to make, and where Brady wants to throw the ball and all of that it's kind of like saying we're really simple up front, but there's this, and this that you have to kind of consider given a particular look that might be a little more complicated on the back end or underpinning it all. So the offense looks simplistic, but then all the adjustments that Brady knows become tougher. Because you notice like Peyton Manning, when he stopped in Denver, it was kind of like he taught those guys how to run routes. Demaryius Thomas pretty much says, I became a route runner after I worked with Tom Brady. Before that, I ran like 4 routes. You
have a choice. So. If you want Peyton Manning to throw you the ball, you better be where you're supposed to be at the time you're supposed to be there.
And Manning's going to work with them. Chad Spann talked about how when Manning had the neck injury, that he literally would work with those guys during practice, just on handoffs and exchanges and play action, and talk about concepts that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise just because he was hurt and unable to throw. So anyway, that was a fun little discussion. We got Bloom back here.
Yeah, the show must go on. Thank you, Matt. That's fantastic. I was wondering if I was going to come back to an empty room. And poor Gene
deserves the credit.
Yeah, and poor Gene, he usually gets to go back to his life. But thank you, and thank you everybody. The show must go on. The show must go on. Cecil Lammey taught us that a long time ago, and believe me, we had some moments where the show did go on against some natural forces. And I'm back from the ether. I'm back from the void, and we can send Gene to the void now. And
if you could promise you'll stay.
Yeah, I will stay. Oh, I don't know if this is where fear of abandonment comes up. Going all the way back to those original couch episodes, we still have to get at some of these issues underneath, but not now. Not at this time. We will.
Say hello to Jarrell and Boyd for me.
Yeah.
With that, I leave you. I bid you adieu. Good day, sir.
Maybe it's Jarrell Presley.
Maybe with Jarrell with an H. Yeah. So let's talk really quick about this game tonight. Matt Harmon saying Jameis Winston leaving too many plays on the field. Year 3, we make this mistake sometimes of just mapping development. Year 3 there'll be development. Not only is there not development from Jameis Winston yet, but as his numbers came, it was against the Giants last week, and there were a few dimes he put on his guys, but it wasn't an impressive performance. Against Minnesota, it was just because it was garbage time. He actually was not that sharp against Chicago in the opener, but they cruised because of Mike Glennon. So is this now that we're seeing him on this stage where everyone can see that, this is Jameis Winston now? Do you think this is just turbulence on takeoff, or is Winston plateauing in his development right now because he is missing throws that he should be making?
Well, I think there's a couple of things here that are under play here. One is that during the offseason and the preseason, one of the things that they focused on with him and they wanted to get right was his deep ball prowess. He worked very hard on his deep ball all summer long, and obviously it's still not there. Number 2, though, I would say that just as much as it is probably on Jameis Winston that he's not hitting some of these throws, I was mentioning this earlier when you were gone, is in the ether, is that you got to wonder what they're doing. Doug Martin is just gashing this team, and you've got Justin Britt being able to move the middle of this defense at will, and they're not continuing to go to the well with him and make the Patriots stop them. And, the best offensive coordinators that we know, and, the Shanahan family, the one thing that they have been is really great at calling plays. And what they often do is say, look, if it works, we're going to keep going till you show us that you've stopped it. And every time they have like 2 out of 3 or 4 out of 6 plays where Doug Martin gashes them for, somewhere between 6 to 10 yards, then they get so excited about, let's throw it over the top. Let's throw it over the top. Let's go for a deep ball. And it makes the offense very disjointed when you had makeable 3rd and 6s, or you had, 2nd and 3s. And I understand that, sometimes that's the great time to throw it deep. But if your quarterback's not strong in that situation anyway, why not just keep running it to the point where the defense makes it so obvious that you're going to be able to get a deep shot that's really ideal for you? So I kind of think the play calling's a little bit funky too, in addition to Winston. And maybe it is a thing, but I look at it as that, it takes more than a few years for a quarterback to really get things right. And I think that, he still shows some aptitude there that you can see more, but I don't think he's going to be an elite quarterback. I think he's kind of more of that Matthew Stafford that by the time he becomes really, really great, everyone's going to say, oh, whatever, he's just what he is, even though, and then he'll sneak up on them for a few years where he actually has late in his career those top 5 seasons.
Okay, let's turn the page to this upcoming week. But looking back to week 4 also. Well, just really quick, did you get to see E.J. Manuel's few series against Denver? He looked comfortable. He looked like he trusted his mechanics and was putting the ball where he needed to, and he actually gave him a couple shots to win the game. Jared Cook, there was one he put right on Jared Cook. It would have been a tough catch, but he could have made the catch. They could have put them in the lead. And even in the interception was one where he gave Amari Cooper to go up and get a chance. Maybe he could have thrown a little bit more to the outside, but it was a little different E.J. Manuel than the one we saw.
It's got to be a better environment. Yeah, it's got to be a better environment than what he had with the Rex Ryan-led Bills. I mean, that's just an awful environment for an offense.
And when I tweeted out that, I said, may I be forgiven, what I'm about to tweet, that E.J. Manuel actually looked okay. A few people said that Raiders beat writers were also astounded, taken aback at how good he looked in training camp. So that should be something interesting to watch.
He ran a pro-style offense at Florida State and actually did a lot of nice things there. And, sometimes development and where you fit it can really get you off to a bad start. And he had nothing there.
No, and he's got a lot. Offensive line, Marshawn Lynch. Would you go back to Marshawn Lynch this week? It is Baltimore. They don't have Brandon Williams. It is Oakland at home. This is really interesting because these teams were 2-0 and feeling really good 2 weeks ago. Now it feels like their seasons are spiraling away from them. And that seems to me to be a game to give Marshawn Lynch the ball 20 times. So I'm believing it, but this is me talking myself into Marshawn Lynch, isn't it?
No, well, I'm probably right there with you on that end. But here's the thing. I was reading something on my fantasy site on the news. Basically, whoever gave the analysis said that he was done. He looked bad, all this stuff. And I just wanted to laugh. I was like, I wanted to find that person's picture and make a dartboard just to for the sheer ignorance of the statement there. That was just to me, I think the bigger thing is that they are saving him. They're trying to, get him back in. They don't want to have him overdo it and then have him out in the most important periods of time. And they've got a couple other decent players, but now that you got your quarterback out, you may need to lean on him a little bit more. So I agree with you. And I think it's about time. I mean, you've had a good month to ease him in to what's happening, the regular practices, all of that. So he knows the system well. I was kind of thinking with Carr healthy, it would be like week 8, week 9, and then you're going to see him really turn it on. But it might have to be earlier, and I would take a chance on him. And if you can buy low on him, I'd certainly would.
Yeah, this is the time to do that. And it's a pretty brutal running back. It's brutal with 4 good offenses, or 3. We'll see. We see Denver has a lot of good players. It's pretty brutal setting your lineups this week. So if you have enough running backs that you can leave Lynch on the bench, then good on you. Cam Newton. No, we're not going to talk about what he said. No, we're not going to talk about tweets. All right. What we are going to talk about is that I'll say he looked good against New England. He looked like 2015 Cam Newton. He was executing the plays crisply. He was putting the ball in good spots. He looked very comfortable with the ball handling and fakes and misdirection they were doing. And I saw Mike Shula, speaking of play calling or play design, putting this offense in positions, using Christian McCaffrey the way they used Reggie Bush back in New Orleans to distract the defense. And then there's Fozzie Whitaker all alone for an easy 30-yard touchdown catch and run, and doing a lot of things. Yeah, it's New England's defense. And yeah, New England's defense might have made these plays work, but they were calling good plays and Cam Newton was making them work. And we can see tonight that, Jameis Winston isn't going up and down the field and every single play is working and every single throw is working. But it is 1 week. It is only 1 week. So do we go back to Cam Newton this week? Is this a sell high opportunity for Cam Newton? Is this an opportunity to get rid of him? Or what did you see last week, and what does it make you think about his future, at least near future?
I'm still neutral about Cam. Well, I was down on Cam Newton. Now I'm about neutral on him. And I think neutral means to me is he's a matchup quarterback, and it's the system. When you look at Carolina against New England, it's a better matchup against New England than maybe New England's defense against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, like Tony Romo mentioned earlier in this broadcast, that the way that their offense is pretty basic. The way that they do things, it's kind of like, we're going to test you deep. We're going to run certain types of concepts and formations that are a limited number of things. And it's about being more physical or being faster and being able to get behind the defense and testing and winning in those types of fashions and tricking them with some play action and things like that. But when you look at Detroit or you look at New England facing Carolina, what Carolina did is that they bunched formations. You got like 3 receivers tight to the formation, and it forced the New England Patriots defense to have to communicate with each other in ways that some of these new guys aren't good at doing. And you had some really blown coverages as a result of that. And I think that that's going to continue against Detroit, who has been known as a defense to have poor communication and to be too aggressive in certain situations and get kind of confused by some of those types of looks. And I think that that's something where Carolina can have a positive game once again. I don't think it's going to be quite as good as the New England game, because I think Detroit's defense has gotten better, but you're still going to see the way that Carolina matches up with the defense, that if the defense has shown issues in the past of blown coverages, they're going to exacerbate that some more because of the fact that they play those tight trip side types of formations that, you run natural rub routes or you create confusion with who's covering whom off the line of scrimmage.
On the other side of that matchup, we saw Detroit in week 1 against Arizona. Arizona has a good back seven, and you had Kenny Galladay, the Babytron show. We thought we got Marvin Jones, you got Golden Tate, Amir Abdullah is going to run better. This looks like an exciting offense. It's been anything but an exciting offense since then. Well, I mean, it was better against Atlanta, but it still wasn't clicking. These elements aren't coming together. And I know you were very high on Matthew Stafford as a fantasy quarterback, and after 1 week, I'm sure you were feeling good about that. Now, some of this is against the Giants, against Minnesota. They didn't really need to do much. But, hey, without Minnesota fumbling the ball twice in the second half, they might have lost that game 6-7. They might have lost to Case Keenum hats off to Minnesota's defense, and good luck Mitchell Trubisky in your first NFL start against Minnesota on Monday night. We'll all get to watch that. How are you feeling about Detroit's offense at this point? How are you feeling about them this week against Carolina?
I feel fine about them. I'm still actually very optimistic when you consider the schedule of Patrick Peterson, Xavier Rhodes, the cornerback for the Giants, Rabbit.
Rabbit.
Jack Rabbit. Yeah, Jenkins. And you look at that combination of players, they're some of the best cover corners in the league. So they're going to plaster themselves over Marvin Jones because I still argue that he's their best wide receiver in terms of route running and deep threat combination. So that's the guy that's going to get covered. And what that should tell you is that if that's the guy that got plastered and there's only one good game that Kenny Galladay had, I would not be so optimistic about Kenny Galladay. Now, I think he's going to have better weeks because teams are now not going to be able to cover Marvin Jones as well. You're going to see him match up a little better. I mean, Desmond Trufant is a very good cover corner, and that was the fourth guy. So I think that now that they're through that murderer's row of cover corners, you're going to see this offense diversify a little bit more. You're going to see more things work off of Marvin Jones' success, and he's going to have more success. And that's going to help out guys like Galladay. It's going to help out Abdullah. It's going to help out Theo Riddick. And if Eric Ebron, pulls his head out of Kenny Britt's behind, then maybe he might actually have
Darren Fell.
Darren Fells could have a good week. They might have a tight end there. I don't know.
Michael Roberts.
If they don't
had a nice catch in the red zone. Yeah.
Yeah. If they don't have Kenny Britt syndrome, they might be all right.
They might be. I think Philly and Arizona is a real interesting matchup. I want to get your thoughts on this. And really, you can jump in wherever you want. I'm going to do a quick brain dump on it, though. We have Arizona traveling east for an early game. We have Arizona's line in shambles at this point, and you have Philadelphia's defensive line. And Philadelphia's defense last year especially would really swarm at home. Now, Philadelphia also has some vulnerabilities in the secondary. We did see Rasul Douglas, the rookie, roasted by Keenan Allen and Tyrell Williams a few times last week. And we know that Arizona has John Brown, J.J. Nelson, and that guy, Larry Fitzgerald. Philly's good at stopping the run. Arizona doesn't care. They don't want to run. They also have Andre Ellington. So that's 5 targets that Carson Palmer has, if they can keep them upright, if this offense is crisp. I think Rich Rebar called it biorhythm games. And I like that idea that, they're out of their biorhythm. On the Philadelphia side, you have an interesting process watching this offense find itself. Because in the first 2 games, it was Carson Wentz centric. And Wentz was showing some things. But in the game against Kansas City, I think LeGarrette Blount maybe touched the ball once or maybe got 1 target. Now, they come out the last 2 weeks. They're very balanced. And as you've pointed out many times, they have a good offensive line. They're very balanced. If anything, leaning run heavy. I think there were 36 running back carries last week, over 200 yards against the Chargers. As a side issue, Ben McAdoo, run Lane Gallman. Give the kid a chance this week against the Chargers. Just give him a chance. So
they have no linebackers.
Yeah. So, you have Philadelphia, you have Wentz, Patrick Peterson, you just mentioned him. He's probably going to wipe out Alshon Jeffrey. We know, Zach Ertz will get his, maybe Torrey Smith can reel in a deep ball on one of those secondary corners for Arizona. But we have Sun Ra's great nephew, right? LeGarrette Blount. We talked about Wendell Smallwood. And LeGarrette Blount, I have to say, when you saw him finishing out that game against the Chargers and how unable they were to tackle him late in the fourth quarter, that's why you get LeGarrette Blount. This one's a fascinating one, but what out of these factors are going to win out? Is it going to be a Blount day? Is it going to be Carson Palmer day? Is it going to be a Philadelphia defense day?
I think it's going to be a Carson Palmer day because when you take a look at this Philadelphia offense, I have concerns about them matching up with the with the Cardinals defense. I mean, what Carson Palmer has done well is he throws the seam route well, but he's not a deep ball thrower still. He's still just kind of off kilter with his mechanics there. So what they've installed is a lot of read option plays where they can hit the seam route. It's either the slant or the seam route, and the slants to, usually to one of their wide receivers like Aguilar or Jeffrey or, even to Ertz occasionally. But then they try and throw that seam because he's good when he doesn't have to drop back. Like if he can just take one step, set and throw, kind of like those quarterback drills that you see where they just hop and pivot into a position and throw. He can throw accurately at 30 to 35 yards because he's got a big enough arm to do that. But when he has to move his feet and then like set up, reset, and throw, he looks like someone who's like had his legs chained to a post, and then he ends up throwing from really awkward positions. So I think that it's a situation that when you consider that inaccuracy and how they've used the offense to kind of maximize his skills, it doesn't look very good because you've got really good safety play from Tyvon Branch and from, Matthew, who occasionally makes some mistakes taking chances, but Carlos Dansby, the ageless veteran who is great in pass coverage, has always been great in pass coverage. I think Zach Ertz is not going to have as strong of a day as we would expect. And as a result of that, there may be one good guy out of the Philadelphia offense, and it's probably going to be like Aguilar or Ertz on one big play, or Torrey Smith. But placing your chips on that is like playing roulette. So I don't feel good about that. On the other end of the spectrum, though, yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles back end can't really stop anybody at this stage. I mean, they're either too aggressive or they can't tackle, or we've had some sort of issues here and there where I just feel like there's going to be enough, Carson Palmer will find enough time to be able to exploit a few players. And I think J.J. Nelson should have a good game. Jerron Brown should have a good game. I wouldn't be surprised if, 2 to 3 out of 4 players you would consider actually have a good game. And I'd look at this as kind of one of those, 4 or 5 sacks for Carson Palmer, but a 280, 300-yard day with like 3 or 4 touchdowns.
And Nick Folk just lost a job, I would imagine. Roberto Aguayo.
Gosh.
Where are you, Roberto? Nick Folk missed 3 kicks last week. They still won. He missed 3 kicks. Roberto Aguayo, for all of the infamy he will live in Tampa history, never missed 3 kicks in a game last year. Now, one of them was an extra point, but I mean that's important whenever they did come back to win the game by 2 points, but that was part of the reason they were in that position. So Nick Folk just missed another field goal. And that's our game update. We got a few minutes, and remember, folks, Sunday mornings, Gene and Matt and I get together at 10 Eastern, and we'll do a few more game previews. I wanted to touch on one more really fascinating matchup, and Matt, I'm sure like me, you're looking at the slate of games, and we're always drinking from the fire hose for the early games, 6, 7, 8, 9 games going on, but in the late games we can absorb them a little bit more. And there's a trio of great late games this week. Green Bay, Dallas certainly is going to be a fascinating one to watch. But Seattle and the Rams, NFC West showdown. Now, again, I'm just going to do a quick brain dump, but I'll ask you to do the same. One is that we know in recent history, and you can say this is superstition or voodoo, but we know in recent history that Russell Wilson plays terrible on the road against the Rams.
Yes.
Some of his worst games have been on the road against the Rams, but he's coming into this game pretty hot, certainly for fantasy purposes, red hot, but he also is going to get a healthier Doug Baldwin. Tyler Lockett looks like he's got the juice back. Jimmy Graham's getting healthier, and it's a Rams defense that has been very generous. And we'll see about Rawls. Lacey doesn't even matter. They have given up 7 touchdowns to running back, so maybe it does matter from that sense. But and then on the Rams side, and this is what the most fascinating part of this is to me. So I was watching Jared Goff last week against Dallas, and he was moving the ball well, no doubt about it, to the tune of Greg Zuerlein getting like 7 field goals. But Jared Goff has a little Andy Dalton to him, in that once he's flushed from his set point, there's not much is going to happen. Like a la Andy Dalton, as I was watching that game, I was thinking, if he just throws the ball away, that's the best outcome. Once the play doesn't work as designed, just throw the ball away. And Seattle, even without Cliff Averill, might make life hard on him. And let's be fair, looking at some of the defenses that he has taken apart, San Francisco, Indianapolis, he wasn't nearly as successful against Washington, and we are seeing Washington coming on as a better defense. This is the best defense he's had to face. Is this the week that Jared Goff, I don't want to say he's exposed, but you still see he's a second-year quarterback and has a ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to still see where the development curve is for him. And, I think he stands in and does fairly well. I like the fact that the biggest criticism that people have had of him is that he backs up a little bit from the pocket when he's in there. But I think that that's something that was probably more generated from this past year as opposed to his rookie year where he often climbed it. So I'm not as concerned about that. And considering that it's usually a small step, and it's not usually anything big where he's not Tim Tebowing it or doing anything, turn tail and run like Blaine Gabbert did. It's a big difference there. But I would say this is that when you look at this team and this matchup, I think the ground game, to me, it would make sense that Thomas Rawls or J.D. McKissic actually get the production this week, because where the Rams are weakest is on cutback runs. They're weakest on cutback runs and on the ability and on counter plays, where they have issues in terms of the ability to maintain their gap integrity on the backside of plays. So as a result of that, I think that that's more in line of what McKissic can do as a cutback runner or what Rawls can do, not so much Eddie Lacy. So I'm hoping that the Seahawks kind of agree with that idea and continue to, and they're already looking at that from their own in-film scouting. This is still a defense that can give up some big plays, but they're a little underrated when they're healthy. When you have Joyner in there, Lamar Joyner, he's not bad. But I have to see whether or not he's healthy. I don't remember from that matchup. But, I think that you can still see with Wilson to be able to buy time the way that he does. If he can buy time and find open guys downfield, and he's got enough healthy bodies in the receiving core this year as opposed to last year, I think that you still give him a fighting chance as a decent producer. On the other side, the good thing with these offenses, with this offense in LA, is that they have guys who can run crossing routes. They have guys who can get open in the middle of the field and force Seattle to really kind of make switch offs with the middle of their defense. And when that happens, those guys can get open. The issue is, again, how much time can Jared Goff buy? And if I were to make an estimate, I'd say not very much. Not this year, and not with what's going on. So, for me, I think Jared Goff is probably going to have somewhere between a 180 to 220 yard day tops. And if he scores a touchdown, that's going to be a good showing for him, I think, this week. I would not expect much after the catch from Todd Gurley, and just look at the situation as more in line with the Seattle ball game.
And we're at 10 o'clock, but I want to go 10 o'clock Central. I want to just extend this discussion. And I think you and I are seeing things similar with Jared Goff. That's about where I have him projected this week, about 200 yards and a touchdown. It's a tough week with quarterbacks, 4 quarterbacks on bye, but he's not the quarterback. I would recommend Josh McCown off the waiver wire against Cleveland over Jared Goff. Maybe even going back to Jay Cutler because it's Tennessee. Maybe even Jay Cutler.
Jay Cutler. Oh, I would definitely.
Yeah. We're on the same page there. But really quick, since you mentioned him, and my man, fantasy dude, Isaac, and he presented it in a good way. And I'll just serve it up to you like this. Did you get a chance to see J.D. McKissic for the RSP? Whether you did or you didn't, you got to see him last week. He looks like another one of those guys. Just the burst, so compact. And there's a point where being an undersized back can be a benefit because you're so difficult to get a good hit on. You have that low center of gravity that is always over your base. And you could just see the difference. And CJ Precise hurt again. Could McKissic just slot into what they had planned for Precise?
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, I if you haven't checked out the gut check this week, I gave some scouting report information on both on McKissic, Gallman, and Aaron Jones this week, and some film takes from recent games of all of them. And McKissic, to me, I studied as a wide receiver because he played both wide receiver and running back, and he was someone that he actually, he showed good balance. He showed some ability to press and cut, but he wasn't always mature with his decision making, and he knew that he wasn't going to break a lot of tackles. As a receiver, he wasn't quite as refined. He had still a lot more work to do. But to me, he reminded me a lot of what you'd say Dexter McCluster brought to the table. And if McCluster got into the right system and could stay healthy, you would have seen probably a guy that had that kind of upside that McKissick showed. The thing is it's very fit specific, for McKissick. And the good positive has to be that they put him in practice. He produces. He gets into a preseason game with Atlanta, his first touch, 101-yard kick return. He gets into Seattle practice. He produces. They put him in preseason games. He matches Chris Carson against the Chiefs for the rushing lead. He forces them to go to cut Alex Collins because he can play special teams and he can play 2 other roles. And CJ Prosise is banged up. They put him in the first week, and he scores 2 touchdowns on 6 touches. I don't know how many touches it was. It was an insane number ratio. But the thing is that he has a feel for the game. He's not too uncomfortable. He's comfortable, and his teammates, ranging from Baldwin to Sherman to Russell Wilson, have all been lobbying Pete Carroll to get him playing time. So you can build a lot of positive narratives around this, but at the same time, the same positive narratives probably could have been said if Dexter McCluster was an undrafted free agent and he was playing like that. They go, we got to get him in the game. We got to get him more touches. And, that may end up being somewhere between 5 to 7 and, 40-yard days like that, 40-yard days with no touchdowns in between, 4 or 5 games later, he might have 1 touchdown. So it's a risk, but, end of the roster pick for no budget cost at all. Yeah, sure. Why not?
McKissick, fit specific. He produces. We're conducive, and we're enjoying this. Folks, we'll watch as Tampa is about 9 minutes left. A nice catch and run, I believe, by Deshaun Jackson to try to get them going here. So enjoy the rest of Thursday Night Football. Enjoy your weekend.
And 2 weird dudes dressed weirder than we were at the boat over there on the ship.
Yeah, we got to get. Yeah, we can out. We'll have a weird off one of these weeks.
I think they trumped us. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, down in I shouldn't even say anything. I will say this. See, I caught myself. I got to watch when I'm hosting. I caught myself.
I tried, folks. I tried.
Yeah, Cecil Lammy on assignment. He does try, and he said the bait is there. Matt Waldman, Gene Bramwell. We'll be back Sunday morning. We're back here for 8 episodes a week on the Audible. Footballguys.com. Check out the top 10. Check out the gut check. Check out Gene's injury rounds. Follow us at Gene Bramwell. Yeah. All of it. So much good stuff. We do it all for you. We love you at Football Guys. As always, folks, you stay classy.